When Capcom developed and published the 24-megabit Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition for the Genesis in 1993, it was a solid product that delivered in every area but the voice work. It combined the arcade hyper fighting and Champion Edition into one product, adding additional speed settings in the process. The graphics were spot on, the music sounded great, and the gameplay was as close to the arcade as 16-bit arcade to home conversions could get. The sole area of concern were the voices, where throwing a projectile or doing any other special move resulted in some garbled samples that didn't sound the best. It was easy to overlook given the quality of the overall product, however, and most Sega fans came away loving it. Hot on the heels of that release, Capcom prepared an update called Super Street Fighter II: The New Challengers, it too based on the arcade title of the same name. It shipped on a massive 40-megabit cart, the largest retail release game during the run of the Genesis. With the extra ROM size and Capcom having nearly an entire extra year of experience of the Genesis hardware, surely all issues we had before were stomped out, and this is quite simply the very best product it could be, right? In this episode, we answer that question, compare it to a few other releases at the time, and even go head-to-head with the arcade original. Does the Genesis hold its own and prove its worth, or does it fall behind, leaving us wanting more? Let's find out. When Super Street Fighter II was released in the arcade, it underwent numerous balance, presentation, and move changes to the engine. These tweaks and additions were felt across the entire game, from Ken's new flaming uppercut, to combos being counted and called out, a new announcer, new voice samples, new costume color choices, and of course the addition of 4 new fighters. First up is DJ, a Jamaican kickboxer who has incorporated his music and dance style into his martial art. He relies on kicks with impressive reach and a fire-based projectile that gives him excellent flexibility against most opponents. Thunderhawk is a Native American wrestler looking for revenge against Bison for destroying his home. He is a massive figure that is slow, but does impressive damage with a set of moves that allow him to dominate the air and ground against advancing warriors. His Storm Hammer throw can end a match out of the blue. Fei Long is a movie star that is clearly patterned after Bruce Lee. His kung fu moves are fast, and what he lacks in size, he more than makes up for with technique. His Rekka Ken allows him to advance on an enemy quickly, and his Rising Dragon Kick is a great way to knock enemies out of the air. But by far the most popular new addition was Cammy, a British intelligence officer with a very dark past. Her front kick has a Dragon Punch-like counter effect that is quite nice, and her Cannon Drill is a fast-moving low attack that you can just abuse the hell out of. She even has a spinning knuckle move that allows her to get past projectiles unharmed. These 4 new fighters come with the 12 you already know and love so well. That gives this Street Fighter the most options the series has ever seen up until that point. The Genesis port here also has numerous modes to consider when playing. The Super mode is the main game where you'll fight against the CPU, gain victory, and see how the story plays out for your chosen fighter. There is an Expert mode for this that allows you to play every single fighter in the game. Versus mode is pretty self-explanatory. It's here where you can easily battle your friends. After the match is over, it kicks back to the fighter select so you don't miss a beat. It tracks wins and losses, allows you to choose your stage, and you can set up a handicap to help newcomers cope with a disadvantage. The Group Battle mode is a team-based affair where you choose a select group of fighters and take them against a friend. You can choose a by-the-fighter point match setup, or you can do it elimination style, where each fighter fights until they're defeated. Tournament Battle is an up to 8-player match where you fight in a traditional bracket setup to see who's the best of the best. Finally, Challenge Mode is a time or score-based match where you try and beat the CPU under certain conditions. Best part of all this is that there are turbo options available here that even the arcade version didn't have, so the gameplay is even faster. The entire package is an impressive upgrade over the previous release in terms of content and available options.
Round 1, fight! Hadouken!
Along with the changes to the gameplay, Super Street Fighter 2 also sees some changes to the visuals. All the backgrounds see color and art updates that look nice, but the big attraction here are the 4 new stages that come with the new fighters. DJ's beautiful island villa, Cammy's majestic English countryside, Fei Long's colorful and animated garden, and T-Hawk's busy square that's in front of an old Mexican museum. These stages are all based on real-world locations and translate well into Street Fighter's art style. Like before, the fighters are all animated exquisitely and do a very decent job at cloning their arcade counterparts. The sprites are of course smaller and less detailed, but not enough to impact the presentation negatively. Taking a look at a side-by-side with the arcade original, it's clear there is a downgrade in color as well. But you really have to hand it to the Genesis that it nailed the look so well. I mean, each scene, each fighter, each animation does an impressive job of bringing the arcade home in a way that looks authentic and retains enough of the original product that it feels accurate and recognizable. It also compares favorably to the other 16-bit home version on the Super Nintendo, albeit with a few less colors. Side by side, you see the Genesis does an excellent job here as well, proving Sega's console may have been older, but still quite capable in its own right. Let's see a few more stage comparisons to see how it all panned out. The one area where Special Champion Edition really impressed me was its music. It did a great job of replicating the arcade and I was really happy with the end result. You would think that Capcom would take that success and amplify it with the now massive 40 megabit cartridge that Super was on. But alas, this is an audio failure for me on nearly every level imaginable. What was impressive before now sounds tinny, lacks bass, and just comes off like it's on a less capable device. Seriously, almost every single stage has music that sounds significantly worse than the previous game. To add to that utter and complete letdown, the scratchy voices return with no improvement whatsoever. It sounds as if Capcom didn't even attempt to improve their sound driver, and the end result is an audio presentation that disappoints in every conceivable way. I have a few samples for you to see how you feel. The quagmire in recommending Super Street Fighter 2 comes in the fact that this is still an outstanding looking and playing product that sounds like absolute garbage. There is no question Super Street Fighter II on the Genesis has the solid looks of a very competent arcade port. The colors pop, the background's detailed, and the animation is as faithful as you could have hoped for, given the power and ROM size differences from the arcade. The gameplay also impresses. You get every move, every throw, every ending for all 16 fighters, and an entire host of modes to use them in. But as much as I want to give this a glowing review and tell you it's a must-own, I still prefer the original Genesis version of Special Champion Edition. While that version lacks the 4 new characters and the nifty new presentation, I have to genuinely say Old Super here truly does sound that bad. Take a moment and play Dhalsim's stage to see just how awful Genesis audio could be. This ear-crushing display is enough to make you turn the game off every time he shows up. And that's the real issue that is so frustrating with Super Street Fighter II. The game is a straight-up winner in every other way. There is nothing but good things to say about everything else. Capcom nailed the gameplay and visuals, but completely bombed on the audio. This would be one thing if the music in Special Champion Edition had also been terrible, so you had no real expectations beyond that. But that game proved Capcom was capable of great music on the Genesis, so there's just no excuse it ended up terrible here. If you do not care about Street Fighter's audio, ignore all that and enjoy this great 16-bit home port. If you're like me though, you can't help but walk away expecting better out of a machine that was capable of so much more. Another thing worth mentioning about this game is that it came out at a time when Street Fighter began jumping to 32-bit consoles like the 3DO and powerhouse computer platforms like the FM Towns and X68000. These versions were noticeably superior in sound and visuals, making the audio flaws here even more apparent. But like everything else, if you only had access to the Genesis release, you probably didn't care one bit. Having Super Street Fighter 2 at home was all that mattered, and since it plays so well with that Genesis 6-button controller, it was still an absolute blast. But I think it's really important to take note how these later released Genesis titles had shortcomings that were often noted by the gaming press, who would harp on the sound as aggressively as anything I've said here, and even piss on it visually as inferior to the Super Nintendo version. With Sega dropping new platforms so often, and the Genesis getting a bad rep for poor sounding games, it was easy for consumers to abandon the console and the brand for perceived greener pastures. The Genesis was Sega's bread and butter, its lone console to see major success. They should have been working with Capcom closely to make sure the Sega name, the Genesis platform, and the reputation of them both were represented the best possible way. If need be, the Sega Technical Institute should have been put on audio to help Capcom pass any hurdles they faced. Public perception is a hell of a thing, and Sega's rep was taking an absolute beating in the press by this time. By 1994, most of the Best Game Awards were being swallowed up by competitors, and when the system itself was reviewed, it was clearly taking a back seat to Nintendo's 16-bit machine by a wide margin. This plunge in consumer confidence and respect was at a really important time, especially with Saturn so close to its Western debut. Was Super Street Fighter II a letdown or a winner for you? Let me know down in the comments. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.